Hey everybody, so this discussion with Quibbles over coffee is going to be about general minimum wage discussion. We're doing this discussion via video because we're having kind of a debate back and forth on Twitter, and everybody knows how Twitter is. It's really not very conducive to like long-winded conversations. I was getting like messages post, like every 3 or 4 messages he would send, I would see one and respond to it, and I'm like, okay, this is just not working out. Let's try to have this moderate debate about whatever minimum wage issues we might have via video, so we can actually interact in real time. This is not a streamed discussion. We are recording this discussion tonight simply because I didn't have the bandwidth to like set up a whole streaming session with it, get it all promoted and stuff like that. So we're trying that out, and we'll be posting this on YouTube when it is edited for just a little bit of time and maybe any context that might be needed. So little like blurbs here and there where there might be something like maybe that was something people don't really know about. So let me pull in the actual example so we have the study so you can go look it up. Stuff like that. Nothing else will be touched. Content will be touched. But that's what we'll do. So Quibbles, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get started. You can ask me questions and start from there.
Okay, sure. So I'm Quibbles / Jonah, if you want to use my actual human name. Yeah, I guess like who I am. I live in Pittsburgh. I work for a nonprofit, a housing nonprofit. I used to be somewhat involved in like the online debate world thing. I've been less so for the last year or so. But we got into an argument on Twitter, and now we need to argue off Twitter. Yeah.
100%.
That's basically who I am. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Go for it.
Do you want to start or should I start?
Yeah, you should start, because I don't think we're necessarily disagreeing. I think like we do have a fundamental disagreement. Tiberius was wrong. I do think we have a fundamental,
yeah, we definitely do have a fundamental
disagreement. But I think that there might be more stuff that we agree on than we disagree on. So I just don't know exactly where you're coming from this. And I think it would be best if we just kind of had a little rehash for that. And yeah.
Okay, so my basic premise is that when I'm thinking about the job of government, I think that the society should be defined in terms of its like moral value, based not on like how good it is for the best person in the society, but how good it is for the worst person in society, the person who's the worst off in society. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like from that basis, I am very uncomfortable as like a general statement, taking opportunities away, even if they're bad opportunities, taking opportunities away from people who are in desperate situations. So I see minimum wage as a way of taking away opportunities from people who are in desperate situations. I don't think that getting paid $14 an hour is good. I don't think getting paid $20 or even $30 an hour is good. I don't hope that people get to that situation. I hope that people are able to get significantly more than that. I hope that they're able to, everyone's be able to millionaire, whatever it is. But like, you know, if we're talking about the world that actually exists today, we're talking about a world where we have many, many people in desperate situations, many, many people who would be better off if they had a job, and if they had income coming in. So I just want to break those down into two sort of separate things, because the job, I think, is valuable as a separate thing beyond just the money. When I think about, so the example that I brought up on Twitter was people with cognitive disabilities, and with learning disabilities. And in some cases, Prospector also this movie theater that I've been somewhat involved in, not all that intensely. It's a organization that's done a huge amount of work. It's a nonprofit, and it's a movie theater, and you can go see it as just like a normal movie theater, as any other movie theater. But the difference is that it's all of the money goes to education to a bunch of people who are trying to learn how to have job skills, because they have severe disabilities that make it difficult for them to work. When I think about the value of that work, it's not just the fiscal. Fiscal is part of it. It's important, though, from a perspective of emotional independence, because the independence isn't just a fiscal independence, it's an emotional independence. People deserve to feel and to genuinely be correct in feeling that they have their own lives that they are living as themselves.
Sure.
And that is, I think, a really important thing. I think a job is a huge component of it. because otherwise you're just sort of constantly leeching off of people, and you feel like you're leeching off of people. And so when I think about people in situations like that, when I think about people who have PTSD, when I think about people who have been previously incarcerated, when I think about people who are and these are the groups of people who predominate the lowest rung in society. The people who are homeless. Mm-hmm. These are people who predominate situations that are really ripe for abuse and very difficult circumstances. These are also people who, understandably, employers are concerned about hiring. It makes sense that people, when choosing to hire, would rather choose someone who has not been previously incarcerated over someone who has been previously incarcerated. It makes sense that people, when giving an opportunity between someone who has severe cognitive disabilities that will potentially hamper their ability to, perform basic tasks, it makes sense that those are not the people who are chosen. But the reality is that those people still do deserve to have a place in our society, and those people do deserve to have jobs. And when we have a minimum wage, and we artificially cap the lowest rung of society, and we say, no, you cannot go below this, that would be wonderful if we were actually guaranteeing people $15 an hour. But we're not doing that. What we're doing is we're saying $15 an hour, or 25 is what Nina Turner suggested, $25 an hour. And if you can't get someone on the free market to pay you $25 an hour, tough luck, bucko. You don't get to make any money at all. Tough luck, bucko. You don't get to have any job at all. I think that's atrocious. I think it's morally repugnant.
Okay. So I completely understand where you're coming from. I believe that our fundamental disagreement is whether or not where the moral impetus for this should lie. So my opinion is that we should, if a person is being employed, or not even employed, a person deserves basic living expenses simply because they're a person, right? That's where I'm at from this. So that's why I said we can talk about, in that discussion, I said we can talk about whether or not people should be getting a universal basic income of some sort, and where those kind of things are there. Because I think that's probably the ultimate goal here, is to ensure that everybody is being taken care of, and that working being beyond that may be an extra thing, and can do all those things that you're talking about. Because there's things that you can say from like an anarchist lens, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand where you're coming from, kind of things here. But I want to get too off track. What I view it is that when we do things like subsidize people's wages, the majority of people look at those subsidies as a handout. And oftentimes, the subsidies are not necessarily going to the worker themselves, but the company that's hiring said worker. And oftentimes, they end up exploiting those workers in various ways. So, for example, a person that is blind, for example, can be hired at a company, and that person, and if say they're blind and they're working a lower wage job, we're not talking like a computer engineer or something like that, right? They are allowed to be paid substandard wages because that person is being given a job because of some mentality. Not saying that this is where you're coming from, but some mentality that a job in of it itself is a dignifying, creating thing. And I don't buy that argument, because people don't actually look at those people as being dignified because they're working. Most people look at that as being a handout to that person, and them having to have their money taken away to give it to somebody else. I think that's where our disagreements might.
So what's your policy? If it's not that here are the three things that I see as possibilities. Sure. One is that we do those subsidies, right? And people are working in the free market, but they're getting subsidized as they're working in the free market, which thereby makes it work so that they're able to make an income that is survivable, not good, but survivable. Whereas the company is still able to do something that doesn't harm their bottom line, so that the company is actually willing to do it. That's one option. The second option is that we hire them as part of government jobs, which is something we did a whole host of, but not enough of, to get us out of the Great Depression. We still do some amount of it, but a hell of a lot less than we used to at the time. Sure. FDR, and I wish that we'd do more of it now. That's the second option. The third option is neither of those things, which is a terrible answer, because what that answer means is that these people don't have jobs, and these people are going to be homeless and going to die. Right.
So where my position is that rather than subsidizing the company, We should subsidize the person, so that the company isn't being incentivized to hire them to get a tax break or what have you, and then simply exploit them for their labor. So that's why I'm not necessarily keen on the universal basic income, because people are going to be like, well, you're getting what you needed, so here's a $2 job, take it or leave it. Like, that's where I'm coming from. I feel like that's beneath morally should not be acceptable by anybody, because then you're subsidizing the company by subsidizing the person. So it's I know I just talked myself in a circle here. I do get that.
Wait, so I'm confused. So you're saying we shouldn't give out UBI?
I'm not saying that we shouldn't give you UBI. I am not 100% sold on any one solution. My contention is that I don't want the company to end up getting any of the benefit, and the company should still have to pay a quote unquote living wage. That's where I'm at. So
okay.
So rather than subsidize the company, we can subsidize the person. That's one way to do about it. But then if we don't tell the company, hey, you have to also give a full minimum wage, then their incentive is to offer the lowest wage possible that people will be willing to take. And some money is better than no money. And a lot of people would be accepting of the fact that a person with disabilities, a person with an incarceration record or a criminal record, what have you, would then be like, well, tough luck, take it or leave it. Where to me, no company should be able to offer that. Like, they should have to offer the fair wage, and that $2 an hour is not a fair wage.
Okay, I'm going to ask a fiscal question. I want to be very clear. This is not a moral question. This is a fiscal question. Do you think fiscally that there is anyone in this country who is not worth $15 an hour fiscally?
That's a tough one. See,
I don't think it's tough.
No, it is tough. So in an ideal world, no.
But that's not the one.
I know. Yeah. I'm saying that's why in an ideal world, no. As of right now, due to the structures that we have in place, yes, there are people that are not worth that because of the structures that we have in place.
Awesome. I agree with you. The structures that we have now are the structures that we have to work with. So given that there are people in this country, well, I mean, do you disagree with that?
Well, I disagree that that's where we should start. We should start with fixing the structures.
My point is, if we're going to make policy that is going to affect the world as it exists today, if we're going to change, like if we want to first make it so that every single person in the country is fiscally worth more than $15 an hour, and then we do some other nonsense, cool. But my point is, like, if we're going to do some nonsense with an understanding that it is going to affect these people who are currently not worth $15 fiscally an hour, then we have to understand that the thing that we're doing is going to affect those people. And there do exist these people who are worth less than $15 an hour. There exist people in this country, I'd argue, who are worth less than $9 an hour, less than $8, less than $6 an hour in this country. Fiscally speaking, morally, of course not. But fiscally, I think that is absolutely the case.
So here's how I would go about trying to fix that. Get these incentives in place to make it to where anytime a person is hired, it benefits the company, and anytime a person is being paid too low, it negatively impacts the company. So we can do this through tax incentive structures to where once a person is hired, the company gets a larger tax break as long as that person is making X amount of dollars.
Aren't you still just subsidizing the person? Wasn't that the whole thing that you were concerned about?
I am concerned, but the person is, but the incentives are more opaque and less derived than saying here's direct. This is a direct subsidy to your check, right? So it's breaks it up a little bit.
So you're just trying to hide the ball, but the ball is the same ball. You're just trying to hide it.
I think that the way it would be interpreted versus one way or the other is a point that's necessary to address. So if if a person is getting a check from a company that's $2 an hour, and then the government says, okay, here's another $10 an hour, then it's the government directly subsidizing that person, and the company's making the benefit. Whereas a person that gets a check for $15 an hour, and then the company gets some weird tax break, it's not going to appear to be a direct subsidy of that person because it's not. It's all indirect stuff.
Okay, so you want to indirectly get to the same place as if you're subsidizing them, but you just want to make sure that from a dignity perspective that is being hidden.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's important, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not. Yeah. I agree. The dignity component is important, and I agree with you. I don't think that's crazy. What I do think is crazy is to make a law that creates this artificial floor if people are still able to slip underneath that floor.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think that's
That's
a
what
problem with the.
that is what Nina Turner said.
So
She
what
said,
Nina, I did only read the one tweet. So what Nina Turner's talking about with the $25 an hour wage,
minimum wage.
That's taking into account a lot of things that just, it makes sense on a surface, but when you get down into the numbers, it doesn't. So one of those components is the productivity level of a person being able to produce more money for a company and not getting a proportional share that they got in like the 1960s or 70s.
Right, but that's not how money.
Right. That's why
No,
I don't agree.
That's not how you're paid. You're not paid based off of individual productivity.
Right, but she's saying right, and this is why I don't agree with her. Right. So when she says that, she is taking that number specifically comes from a study that looked at what would wages be if it kept pace with inflation and kept pace with productivity. So a person that was making X amount of dollars in 1960 represented X productivity on the average worker, and the wage represented X amount of dollars in current dollar value. And if you combine those together, you get around that $25 an hour wage. This is why I asked if he understood what she was saying.
I understand what she's saying. She's just fundamentally incorrect and doesn't understand how the economy works. Because
I agree.
Okay, but I just want to explain what I mean by that.
Sure.
Like, productivity is an atrocious measure of trying to understand the value of a person. When you look at productivity, imagine that we are a moving company, right? And we are trying to move couches. If I'm the first laborer and I'm not able alone to move a couch, I am zero. My productivity is zero. If you're the second laborer, by virtue of there being two laborers now the productivity has moved to, whatever it is, $70 an hour in productivity jointly between the two of us. It's obviously ridiculous to suggest, first of all, I don't know who you define as being the first or second laborer, number one. But number two, if that's the situation, it's crazy to say, oh, well, we're both worth $70 because without us, we would be getting $70 less. Because of course not. No, obviously we're both worth 35-ish in terms of it. If it's something that's simple. Now, if you include the reality of what a shipping company is, there's also the cost of all of the infrastructure. The infrastructure includes the car, the infrastructure includes the gas, the infrastructure includes all of the different things that are cost built in addition to our salaries. It also includes, when you start to get to a larger company, the cost of building the company itself, right? There's a great deal of both intellectual and fiscal capital required to build out the company. So if we're having someone responsible for our advertisement, that person needs to get paid. If we're talking about someone all of this, so productivity is just an atrocious measure. So she's crazy on that level. Yeah.
It's from a specific study that didn't even try to make this point. It was just what it was doing was what the study was actually doing was showing how much more of the share that the top 10%, I want to say, of people were taking from the economy versus what they used to take. And they were showing that productivity was one of the aspects that maybe should go into a worker's pay. I don't agree with that. That's why I'm like you. That's not how the economy works. Neither one of us are necessarily, well, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure you're not anti-capitalist.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. So neither one of us are anti-capitalist as a base or anything like that. So that's where she was coming from, which is why I asked, did Tiberius understand where she was coming from? Because a lot of people don't. And so that's why I'm like, I get her argument. I don't agree with it, but I don't think everybody actually understands what argument she's actually making here. So, which is why I ignored it the entire time.
That's one component of it. I guess we just have to get back to the moral component, because I think that we understand where she's coming from. We also both agree that she's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. So my argument is that we exist in the society that we exist in. We both agree that there are people in the society who are not fiscally worth $15 an hour. If we make it illegal to pay someone less than $15 an hour, What do you think happens to those people who are not worth $15 an hour fiscally?
As the system is set up now, they don't get employed. But I'm also not of the mind that every job is better than no job. I don't think that that's.
Don't you think that the person who's making the decision? Don't you think that the person in the situation that is significantly more valuable than you should be the one who gets to make the decision of whether or not they should be employed?
Sure, but we have to also look at the other realities that we live in, and these decisions end up making people fall victim to human trafficking. So, like the next,
hold up. Be really clear here. Are you suggesting that someone getting paid $14 an hour is, in a legal sense?
No, I'm saying
$14 an hour at a fast food place is more likely to get human trafficked than someone who cannot do that and is therefore forced to take a black market job because that is the only opportunity they have to stay off of the street.
I am saying that the logical argument that says that a person should be able to make those own decisions for themselves end up leading to some people falling victims to human trafficking because of the notion that any job is better than no job. And this is what happens. It happens to the most vulnerable people in society, and it happens across every single culture. So this isn't just a US problem. I'm not trying to say that it is, but I'm saying that this is another part of the reality that we live in, which is why I don't buy the argument that every job is better than no job, because there are some people that are being offered jobs that end up falling victim to these things. And that's not morally right, and that needs to be stopped. And there's a way that we have to go about doing those sort of things. Now, not saying that having a $15 an hour minimum wage stops that, but I'm saying that from a argument standpoint, that saying any job is better than no job is just not correct, which is why I said that.
Well, that's not what I said. What I said is that having a job paying $14 an hour at McDonald's is better than not having a job at paying $14 an hour at McDonald's. That's what I'm saying. So I want to clarify. We have safety laws. And those safety laws we should have, right? We have laws around sexual harassment. And the sexual harassment laws we should have. Okay. We have laws around a whole host of things. And those all make sense. Those are different than fiscal. The reason that those things make sense is because you can't consent going into the job to the understanding of all of those downstream repercussions of taking this job. But you understand up front exactly what the price that you're getting paid is. And I think that people, if we believe in the capacity of adults to consent, we have to believe in the capacity of people to consent to situations that are bad. And we should try to get to a society, where people aren't made to take those jobs, because if we want to have a broader understanding of consent, we can understand that there is an immense pressure to keep people off of, out of homelessness, right? Right now, there are 47% of Americans spend upwards of 30% of their income right now on housing, right?
The government should be building housing.
Of 30 million people in this country who spend upwards of half of their income on housing. We don't have enough housing. This is an awful situation. Homelessness is a crisis of our country. There are crises around about healthcare. There are crises around addiction. All of this is a reality, and it is a reason why people are in a situation where they need to take these awful choices. But given the reality that we're in, I don't want to be taking away those choices. I only want to take away choices that people can't actually consent to, because people can't actually understand what they are consenting to. That's the only kind of choice that I want to take away.
So if we have a structure set up in such a way where the lowest amount of money that a person is offered is, say, $5 an hour, and you can't live out that at all, it doesn't even make a dent into your basically transportation issue.
Well, let's clarify. It absolutely does make a dent, right? Getting paid $5 an hour
it's more than zero. Okay, I get that, but
no. It's not just that it's more than zero. It's that the time that you are in McDonald's being a fry cook, getting paid $5 an hour, you are inside not freezing. You are able to drink water. You are able to go to the bathroom. Okay. You are able to you're laughing, but these are
I get it.
Daily issues for people who I have a personal deal with, right? And this is a very, very real thing. And I don't think that the
But why should McDonald's be able to exploit their labor in order to make more of a profit?
You're saying McDonald's exploiting them they have no other option? What's
That's the
their
point. They don't
'cause
have
I don't
another
care.
option.
But that's my point. I don't care about
Right.
McDonald's. I care about the person who has an opportunity either to freeze to death on the street outside of McDonald's or to not freeze their
But why is
them
that the dichotomy?
inside of McDonald's. I'm
This is
sorry?
why this is the false dichotomy I think that we're forced to be in by the structures that we have, which is why I want to change the structures.
But then
McDonald's shouldn't.
you should be arguing for a minimum jobs guarantee. You should not be arguing for a minimum wage, taking away options from
because
people.
I'm not against. Okay, so
options
I've
for
argued
people.
in the past for a federal jobs guarantee, and I think that that's still a fair thing to have. I'm not against it. Even with a federal jobs guarantee, I do not want to have a company offering somebody like under $15 an hour or whatever it is. I don't want that to be an option because it is exploiting people inherently because of the cost of living.
Okay, so if people are being exploited by virtue of the fact that they are let's like zoom out. Capitalism as it exists today is there is a gun to people's head, particularly on the lowest level of the lowest rung of society.
For sure.
Because if you don't have to take this job, but if you don't take a job, you are going to die.
Yes.
Right? And that is just a fact of life for millions of people in the United States.
Correct.
I want to get to a situation where that is not a fact of life for millions of people in the United States. That is why I believe in a jobs guarantee. That is why I believe in UBI. That's why I believe in universal health care.
Sure.
That's why I believe in education. That's why I believe in blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right?
We're mostly on the same page.
Sure. Not quite. Because that said, we exist in the society that we exist in today. And we have to make policy that is both moving us in the correct direction, but also as an individual policy won't destroy us and won't kill people. Right?
I think
and we are in a very dire situation. And if we were in a situation where everyone was getting $100 an hour UBI, dope, then maybe what you're talking about I even then don't think that what you're suggesting would at that point what you're suggesting wouldn't do anything, right? But I don't think that it would be damaging in the same way that it is damaging right now. But what you're suggesting is damaging right now, and it will kill people.
It's only damaging right now because we're talking about things in a vacuum. So if the one policy is to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour and nothing else exists, then you are probably correct. But that's not how policy is. That's not how governments are run. You don't have this dichotomy where you either get this or nothing. Not necessarily. Sometimes that's, we only got the ACA right out of Obama's 8 years, essentially. There was other stuff too, but that was the biggest thing, right? There are things that should be done that move us, like you said, to that state. But I think along the way, you should prioritize doing one step over another and getting things in a way. And I don't want the company to be allowed to exploit these people's suffering. So
I just don't care about the company.
Why don't you care about them exploiting people?
No, I don't. You are putting on this moralistic language about the ethical virtue or lack thereof of McDonald's. I am fully on board with the idea that McDonald's is a soulless multinational conglomerate that hates poor people, blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
I do not care at all about
that's where
McDonald's.
we disagree.
I care about the McDonald's workers.
I care about them too.
No, but I don't think you do.
No, I do. I do care about them. So what I'm saying is McDonald's shouldn't be allowed to exploit them, and they should be able to have.
I don't understand why you're talking about McDonald's.
Because them being exploited is also a negative thing.
They are
having. What? I'm sorry. Say again.
Would you rather be exploited or not exploited?
Not exploited.
You are incorrect. Because
why would I want to be exploited?
Because the person who is homeless on the street is not being exploited by anyone. The person who is working at McDonald's is being exploited by someone. That's a false dichotomy.
Because the person that's homeless is being exploited by somebody else.
No, it's not a false dichotomy. That is the dichotomy that people are actually living with on a daily basis in America.
They're still being exploited. They're not being exploited by a company, but the system is still exploiting them. They're still a victim of the system.
What do you mean by they're a victim of the system?
Well, they're homeless. They shouldn't be. Why are they homeless? It's a systematic
If we want to
problem.
get into like Georgist land policy, we can do that.
No,
I certainly have
I
a
know.
whole
What
list
I'm
of
saying. So okay,
but that's not what we're talking about.
let's try to do it this way. Okay, so in my ideal world, I already said that like I'm not 100% sold on any of the one things I mentioned, but I said, hey, let's make it to where the company gets some sort of tax incentive where they don't pay somebody $15, or they don't pay somebody under $15 an hour, and everybody's honky dory, right? The people that don't get a job for whatever reason in that situation, yes, a federal jobs guarantee probably will be the best thing for them. Absent that, a UBI would be the best thing for them. Sure, we're on the same page there. It's where we veer off is like, okay, we want something now. My thing now would be a more robust welfare system. Then, when the more robust welfare system is in place, or making that in place in the stopgap while changing the incentive structures that allow companies to exploit people in this way. And then you can take the scaffolding of the advanced welfare system and replace it with other things so people don't fall through the cracks.
All right, I'm going to make a comparison. Have we talked about land policy before?
Yeah, we had a whole discussion about
okay, cool.
About it.
So okay, awesome. So I think that property taxes are bad for a whole host of reasons.
Yes,
the primary reason is that I think that the primary reason, just for the audience sake, is I think that property taxes are a tax on infrastructure. I think that we're literally punishing development. We're literally, forcing people to pay extra because they've dared to, invest in their own community. I think it's awful. I think land value taxes are a lot better. What I think the focus on minimum wage today is the equivalent of saying, I think property taxes are bad, so let's get rid of them, without saying the land value tax thing in conjunction to that. It's essentially saying that, like, this is bad, right? The fact that people are getting paid, $8, $6 an hour, whatever it is bad. And so therefore, let's stop that. But we're not actually doing the land value tax. We're not actually doing the thing that will actually fix the problem. All we're doing is getting rid of this thing that is admittedly problematic. The fact that people are not getting paid $15 an hour is admittedly a problem, that this is the situation that we're in.
Sure.
But if you're not actually giving this a solution, and all you're doing is getting rid of this bad solution that exists currently, which is that people get paid not enough to have a comfortable life, but more than zero, and you're not actually offering them some better alternative, what you're doing is actively making things worse. The only thing that, as a Georgist, is responsible for me to do when talking about property taxes is saying land value tax. I can't just say get rid of property tax. I have to explicitly state land value tax. If you're concerned about people not getting enough money right now, and the fact that people are getting paid $7.25 an hour, and you want to make sure that people are getting paid more than $7.25 an hour, saying it is illegal to pay someone $7.25 an hour is not giving them the land value tax. What it's doing is taking away the property tax.
That's what where the other policies come in.
Here is the government. The government will guarantee you $10 an hour or whatever, 12, 15.
But the federal jobs guarantee also has you brought up the dignity argument, and I am concerned that the government job is not going to come with the dignity that it should come with. Which is why this is why the conversation on Twitter was a mess, because it was going in like 8 different directions. So let's talk about federal jobs guarantee, like it. I'm all in favor of it. I don't necessarily know if it will actually create the dignity of work, but it sets a price floor and it gets things done that we need to get done. Whether that is childcare, building roads and bridges, whatever. There's a ton of stuff that isn't done in society because fiscally it's not worth it, but it's 100% worth it in the macro sense, and it needs to be done, and it's not being done. Federal jobs guarantee can provide that outlet. I'm for that. Absent of that, then we have other ways to go about this. So if we were saying, hey, everybody that works deserves a living wage, we give everybody that works a living wage, or even a little bit more than a living wage. And on the other hand, we say, hey, we're going to have a robust welfare state that helps people that fall through the cracks, getting them the job training that they need, or what have you. Those are the two that meld. And most of the people that talk about minimum wage are actually talking about both, because not everybody is going to be able to work. There are some people that are just too disabled to work, and they need to be taken care of as well. And if they're not too disabled to work, they need some help. They need the support for that as well. And then they can work. And the work that they do should be in addition to whatever support that they're getting.
Okay, so I have sort of 2 converging thoughts there.
Sure.
One is the component of you're suggesting that there's a lack of dignity in government jobs.
I'm worried.
Yeah,
just to clarify, I am worried that it is not going to be looked as dignified simply because people suck and they're like, well, you're just getting a government job. You can't get a real job. Like, I'm worried that that's going to be a thing. I'm not saying that it will be. I'm just saying that if we're building that policy, we should build that policy in such a way where that's not the go-to argument from people.
Yeah. So for context, I have a government job currently. I work for AmeriCorps. I get paid $16,400 a year for it, which is obviously significantly lower than minimum wage. Now, admittedly, I absolutely have opportunity to make a lot more than that, just personally. But that is a government job. It is a job that has been really important to the nonprofit sector generally. It's been really important in housing. It's been really important in immigration reform. Yeah. It's been really important. Blah, 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 blah. So too, one of the largest jobs programs in American history is, of course, the largest one is, of course, the military, right?
Yes.
I don't think that anyone looks down, or at least I hope no one looks down on people because they're
you'd be surprised. I've talked to conservatives that when I told them that I had joined the military, you couldn't get an actual job. I see. Like, the people do have these, and there's a large percentage of them.
I think the majority of people respect military service.
I think that's becoming less as the military becomes more woke.
And
these are the concerns that I have, because what a lot of people are going to like.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned is that a lot of people are going to be like, like so-and-so is working in the government job. They're just filling ditches in the back. That's not a real job. They couldn't get a real job. I'm worried that it's going to be viewed as things like that. And this is like a marketing thing, as well as making sure those aren't the primary job. So the way I would do it, I would start off top, fill out all the freaking regulatory jobs that we need, and work down so that people know that that's not the case. Well, top, squish it, make it a sandwich. They start at the top and bottom and squish it to the middle. So you fill all the top roles, fill all the bottom ones, and you squish it to the middle until all the jobs that the government needs to do are filled. It's a marketing thing. It's a marketing. It's which jobs you fill first, what gets played, all that sort of stuff to avoid people thinking that government jobs are just.
Yeah, you're a lot more focused on branding than I am.
But branding is important because if you care about dignity, what are people going to think of if they're branded wrong? They're going to think that this person's a worthless piece of shit.
I think that the branding of, does this person have a job or does this person not have a job, is a lot more important than what the job is. I don't think that someone there are absolutely a large component of society looks down on people who are fry cooks at McDonald's, but I don't think that there's anyone who's a fry cook at McDonald's and used to be homeless that doesn't feel a sense of value and doesn't feel a sense of place comparative to when they were homeless, now that they're a fry cook and now that they have a home.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just concerned that it's not going to be the actual dignity that people are expecting it to bestow.
I don't think that dignity is ones and zeros. I think that dignity is a spectrum.
It's a scale.
We're talking about I think that the dignity of, being, I don't know, Elon Musk, although he's kind of screwed himself over on Twitter or whatever, but that is, there's more dignity in that than there is in job. But I don't think that we can fairly assess, school teachers getting paid a normal salary as a school teacher. I don't think we can assess that as being an undignified job.
No, I get what you're saying, and you're not wrong. I just have maybe a little bit more concern about it, simply because if people do believe that this is just like worthless work, and the people that working these jobs are worthless, the program's going to end up going away eventually.
I guess so. I mean,
it's the same thing happened with welfare.
Yeah.
Welfare used to be viewed as like, we're helping people, and then after Reagan, it's like, these people are just leeches, fuck them. And I'm concerned that the same kind of thing, if not taking into a consideration, is done for a federal jobs guarantee or even a UBI. Like, this is
let's break this into sort of two different conversations, because one of these conversations is branding, which I think is a valuable conversation, but the other question is just at a policy level, what is the correct policy to get to?
Okay.
And then once we've understood the policy, that's the right policy to get to. I think that then the branding question is still an interesting question, but I think a different question, if that makes sense.
So
yeah.
for that aspect of it, I think it's an order of operations problem that we probably are actually disagreeing with. I think rather than necessarily, coming up with a federal jobs guarantee first, before we start talking about the exploitation that companies are putting workers through, we should do both maybe at the same time. Or maybe if we can't do both at the same time, maybe we focus on, hey, making sure that people that have fallen through the cracks don't in the current system, shore that up while trying to build up the federal jobs guarantee and eliminating the exploitation that's happening from the companies not paying people a wage that is moral and just.
Okay, I have a question. If you lived in a society where there was a jobs guarantee and anyone in society could get a government job, whatever that looks like, however
Sure.
we manage to sort of, design that. But anyone who wants a salary of $15 an hour could get a salary of $15 an hour. Would you think that it should be illegal for someone to choose to take a different job at $14 an hour?
Should it be illegal to?
Yeah.
I do think there should be some interplay in this, and there is some on like mom and pop, and certain size companies are able to pay under minimum wage currently. Like family businesses, you don't have to pay minimum wage because they're family businesses, stuff like that. I don't know if it should be probably, because it's what is the cost of living. And if you are paying under the cost of living, then you're essentially stealing from that worker's productivity. Well, not even productivity, you're stealing from them, essentially.
Well, you're not stealing because they've consented to it. They had an opportunity to get paid $15 an hour, and they've chosen to get paid $14 an hour.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So the government guaranteed job would be $15 an hour, and then the $14
is 15. There's a not government job. There's a corporate job of some sort, or a non-profit, whatever kind of job. It's not government job. This job is paying $14, and this person wants to take the $14 an hour job, even though they have the opportunity for this $15 job.
I think it's possible that market forces would simply prevent that from happening, and there might not necessarily need to be a law to prevent it from happening. But but I'm still hesitant to say, yeah, that's fine, because we don't know scale. Hopefully, if scale is not huge, like if only the government was offering $15 an hour jobs, and those jobs are starting to get less and less, and then everybody else was offering under that, and people were just like, we have to work over there because there's not enough government jobs, then that's still exploitation.
So I just want to clarify. My question is, anyone who wants it can get the $15 an hour. Someone has
so ideally, if the ideal situation in which anybody that wants a $15 an hour job can get one, and simply somebody wants to bid under a little bit less, it's not going to actually cause a systematic breakdown, because this isn't a perfect world. I don't think we're ever going to have that, so I'm fine with that in idealistic sense. I just don't think that's going to be possible.
Okay, so if we had a perfect jobs guarantee, a true guarantee of jobs, you would not support a minimum wage?
I think a minimum wage would be redundant at that point.
Well, more than redundant, it would do some degree of harm, because some people might take the $14 an hour job
for whatever reason.
So it would harm for whatever reason, right? Sure. Like one of those reasons might be education, right? Like there are lots of people currently who take internships for various reasons, and those internships are an educational benefit, hopefully, if they're being done correctly. I certainly have friends who have taken those jobs that absolutely were educational, and absolutely they did learn things. I've learned things from the one internship that I took. And that is a good thing.
Yeah, no,
right?
there's in kind of things that would be fine, and I'm not against those per se. It's just when
even if you just like, I prefer this job. I just really enjoy, cooking and cooking, whatever it is, and it's just fun for me, and I'm close to retirement.
Because we have a perfect system where that's not becoming the norm. I just don't see it happening.
Okay, so my point is, like, if we did the jobs guarantee component, then minimum wage would be useless. It wouldn't do anything. As it stands today, minimum wage does do something, but the thing that it does is potentially force people who are at the lowest rung of society to have fewer options than they have currently, and those people, instead of being able to get paid $6 or $7 an hour, are now getting paid $0 an hour instead of being inside in the air conditioning
Sure,
or inside
I understand that.
in the bathroom, the running water, and the food to eat. They're outside, starving, homeless, and freezing.
I understand what you're saying, and it is a compelling argument. I just don't see that being the correct solution. Again, it's an order of operations thing. If it is the only solution on the table in order to ensure that everybody is taken care of, where they're at least inside at 8 hours a day and able to do something, fine, right? But that's not. I don't believe that's the only parsable solution that we have, and I don't think it is the correct one to pursue first.
I guess my point is, like, right now, minimum wage is doing harm. If we got to the situation where we had a jobs guarantee, minimum wage would be doing almost nothing, but on the margins, some amount of harm. I'm missing the part where minimum wage is ever doing anything that is good.
I think it's doing more good than harm currently, because if we didn't, I believe for the people that are working mostly.
So you're saying not the lowest of the low, not the poorest of the poor.
I think the poorest of the poor and the lowest of the low should have a different solution in place that doesn't result in them being exploited by a company. Okay, and that's why I say it's an order of operations thing. Right now, the lowest of the low are people that are homeless, that are not getting government services that they should be getting, and I think that should be fixed. Not necessarily getting rid of minimum wage so that they can work at $2 an hour sweeping the floors in McDonald's.
Well, it's not, to be clear, I'm not saying that that's like a good solution and we're like done.
I don't think it's a good solution. I think the better. All right, I get it.
My point is that is better than what we have today.
But there's other alternatives to what we have today. So we have a welfare system in place that should be getting these people help. It's not. Why isn't it? For a whole host of reasons. If we got those people the help that they needed, then would they still be homeless and then on the street and not being able to work? Or would they end up being able to get back on their feet and then find a job that isn't exploiting them? That's the order of operations I want to go into. I don't want to just be like, okay, let's get rid of the minimum wage here, and then good luck, you might be able to get a $2 an hour job at McDonald's, wherever it is, sweeping floors somewhere, and good for you if you find that. Not everybody's going to be able to find that. Just like they're not able to find it now. So if in an order of operations sense, I think it's better to solve the people that are there.
People would be able to find it than are able to find it currently?
I didn't hear you. Can you repeat yourself?
Do you think that more people would be able to find a job if there wasn't a minimum wage that are currently employed?
That's tough. I think that it might be able to have more people find a job, but I am concerned that it would also drive down wages for everybody else.
But I don't care.
But you should care, because then that's more exploitation.
No, I don't care, because I said at the outset of this conversation that the way that I define the moral, value of a society is based off of the poorest of the poor. But it's based off of the experience of the person worst off in society. Right. So you're suggesting that there is going to be a harm to the people of the middle class and of the lower middle class.
I
agree with you. I probably agree that it will hurt those people, but who it will help is people who are in the worst situation in the society.
It would hurt the people that aren't necessarily in the worst situation, but just barely above it.
Right, but that's my point. At the expense,
you would be pulling those people
on the worst side of society. We have artificially inflated the experience of people who are in one rung higher at the expense of the people worse. But that's unfair to people who are in the worst situation. And if you look at those people who are in those worst situations, it is almost impossible for them to pull themselves back out of the opioid crisis, back out of...
But I don't think the lack of a job is the reason why this is happening. I think the reason
is a primary driver.
I don't think it is. Because what I think that would happen in this situation is that you would cause more measurable harm to the bottom rung and pull them down. You would equalize them, right? So right now they're able to like barely stay afloat. Right now, for this is just, for the audience, don't take this like with factual, okay? This is like hypothesizing. So I think what would end up happening is that you would basically converge the bottom rung and the no rung, to a lower floor, and they would be somewhat materially better off, but not materially better off to where they're pulling themselves, quote unquote, by their bootstraps up to the next rung. I think you would actually make it harder for people to go from the first rung to the second to the third to the fourth by increasing the exploitation that's happening.
Okay, so we agree that. Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. You're suggesting the person who currently has the minimum wage job at $7.25, is that minimum wage, national, federal?
That's still the federal minimum wage, yeah.
Yeah, federal minimum wage, they're getting paid $7.25 an hour. Really awful circumstance, but better than homeless, but better than $0 an hour.
Right.
You're suggesting that if we got rid of the minimum wage, most of those people would end up at like $3 an hour, $4 an hour?
I think what would end up happening is that the minimum wage would fall because of competition. Okay. Well, not necessarily fall like off a cliff, right? There's some places that have $12 an hour minimum wage, and I don't see that going necessarily away per se, but it would drop down by a significant amount, and it wouldn't actually help every single person that is on the 0 rung to get to the first rung. There would still be all those people on the 0 rung, and all you would do is pull down the top. You would pull down the starting rung.
Do you think that it would pull up the person on the bottom, the worst situation in society at all?
The absolute worst person in society, if we condense it down to a single person, no. If we say the worst people in society, some of them would end up
people who are currently up. Okay, so you think that
some people would
benefit the lowest rung?
I don't think it would be a majority. I think it would be it would be a significant percentage, but I don't think it would be the majority. I think we'd still have a huge percentage of people on no rung because of the amount of one, the amount of jobs that exist, but two, also the fact that you can't, if that minimum wage comes down at all, you're going to have more people homeless because there's not enough, all the other stuff we talked about, there's not enough housing, cost of living still going up. Yeah. Then you have more competition for housing, which, wow, that's really shitty to think about, right? You're helping the bottom people try to get housing and you're actually making it more expensive for everybody else. Like this is why I say it's an order of operations.
So you're saying that it's getting more expensive for housing because there are more people who are in the market for housing, because there are more people who are now trying to be able to afford housing, because homeless people are stopping to be homeless, and that would somehow make there be more homeless people?
It would increase the cost of housing by having more people in competition. Not necessarily increase the homeless population, but it would.
That's what I care about. Right?
Okay. Well, no, I get it. This is, like I said, this is an order of operations. We don't disagree necessarily who should be helped the most, but we disagree of how to get there.
Well, we do disagree on who should be helped the most. You seem to think that the first rung should be helped the most. I seem to think
I think the 0 people should be helped the most. I don't think that should come at the cost
of
other people.
But not by virtue of your fiscal policy when it comes to jobs.
Correct. They should be helped. They should be helped in other manners while we get the other systems in place to create this utopia that we both want, essentially. It's an order of operations problem. I don't think starting with a federal jobs guarantee is going to get us there.
It's an order of values. My value is that the person who is worst in society should be the priority.
You can make them the priority in a different way.
Is it the person who is close to, but not that, should be the priority?
No.
Your priority is getting paid $7.25. My priority is the person getting paid $0.
No. We have the same priorities. It's how we do it. We disagree on the solution. I don't think the minimum wage, getting rid of the minimum wage, is the actual solution. I think it will make people materially worse off while benefiting some people on the margins. Whereas
the people who are being benefited on the margin are the people who are worse off.
But not enough. If the aggregate is more people being worse off, that is not a good thing. If you have more people
who is in the worst situation, then it is. Yeah.
I disagree, because you have to take into account what the impacts are going to be on not just on the bottom people, as well as the people that are going to be pulled down from this policy change. Because you can't do it. I understand where you're coming from. I guess maybe I'm not as Rawlsian as I thought I was. I guess maybe I'm more utilitarian.
That's fine. I guess my concern is then, if even if you're not okay, even if you don't have the exclusive primary focus on the poorest of the poor, if your goal is to help both the poorest of the poor and also the close to poorest of the poor, but not the closest to the poorest of the poor, which is to say like the first rung compared
Sure.
to the 0th rung, then the focus should be on housing, healthcare,
I
and
agree.
that's base and transit are the three
Yeah,
things
sure.
that you should be focused on.
And
And
I'm
any
not
conversation about minimum wage is atrocious and should be thrust to the side and shouldn't ever talk about it, because nothing matters to people in the situation that we're talking about more than housing, and nothing matters more than healthcare other than housing, and nothing matters more than housing and healthcare other than transit. And fourth is probably education.
Fourth is what?
Is education.
Okay. So what I would say is that from your moral perspective, yes, makes entire sense. And from mine, I would also probably agree with you. I don't make a lot of arguments about minimum wage all that often. I try to make sure people understand where people are coming from more so than not. But most of my arguments are beyond these things in general. So you're not wrong. I think if we're taking your perspective from this and we're trying to apply a Rawlsian ethics to it, then we should focus on housing and help those people out first, and materially make some of the people in the highest rung worse off by increasing the amount of housing supply. I fully agree that the government should be involved in actual building of housing right now, because there's not enough being done, specifically because of the capitalistic margins, and some of it's property taxes, but not all of it.
I would say the primary drivers are the fact that we have made it illegal to build housing in California and New York. I would say that
the zoning laws are atrocious.
Zoning laws are atrocious. There's 2 acre zoning for most of Connecticut. There's 2 acre zoning for much of New York, much of California.
These are tiny places. They need to have less than 2 acres. Their density needs to be pushed way up. So
right,
we're in agreement.
But I also think that housing is definitely where the focus should be. I guess my concern is that it's not where the focus is. Right, when I look at where the majority of the noise for lefty sort of circles are, it's on these issues that I'm sorry, but these are stupid issues to be talking about. I don't care about Ukraine. I don't care about the difference between Bernie Sanders versus Kamala Harris versus Joe Biden's different healthcare plans. They're all better as healthcare plans than what we have now.
Right.
And none of them seem to be getting done. Right. And I don't care about all of this nonsense about.
You're a pragmatic leftist. You're not a purity leftist, and that puts you on the outs.
I'm a leftist because I believe in helping people. I'm a leftist because I care.
But you're pragmatic about it. You're not going from this whole morality purity lens of it. You're are we helping the worst off by doing this change? Yes, cool. Let's do the change, right?
Well, I don't understand what the other option is.
The other option is having these I have read all this stupid theory and this is the only way we can do something. The left gets involved in these. Well, both the left and the right get involved in these purity checks all the time, but you and I are not part of that. So we look at those people what are you talking about? But yeah, I think that's how I would frame that.
Yeah,
we had this discussion probably because we coming at it from 2 different angles, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Would you say that we're that far apart in where we want?
I would say that we're pretty far apart.
You still say we're far apart?
On the vast majority of policy, no. I think that on the majority of stuff we're pretty close. But on this particular,
yes, okay, that's
we're materially distinct, and I think that your position hurts people. Yes.
Okay. I don't think that your position necessarily hurts people. I don't think it helps. Maybe it won't help the people in the way that you're saying, and it has the potential to hurt the next rung up more.
Yeah, so my goal in this particular policy isn't to help people. My goal in this particular policy is to not hurt people, right?
Fair enough.
I think that, like, in the same way that, like, getting rid of 2-acre zoning doesn't help anyone. It just stops actively hurting people, right? Getting rid
I
of
see. I
redlining
see.
doesn't help anyone. It
So
just stops
so
actively hurting people.
so you're of the mind that getting rid of the minimum wage would stop hurting people, like a lot of people, and
Yeah.
you don't see how getting rid of it could hurt people,
I
or at
see
least
how it would. Okay, so here's like, let's zoom out for a second.
sure.
I
And just FYI, my camera is dying, so I got maybe 5 more minutes.
That's not ideal. Okay, so I'm
5-10
very much
minutes.
in
So
support. Okay, cool. I'm very much in support of unions. Unions do force up wages. That's great. And the way that they force up wages is by keeping certain people from being able to work at their factories, right?
more or
I'm okay
less.
with it. I'm perfectly okay with that, because I think that the job of a union is to protect the people who are in the union, and that's
Sure.
it. The thing is that the United States is a union, but the people who are part of the Union of the United States are all of the citizens of the United States, right? We are a union by and for the people, right? That is
Okay, I get the
the very
analogy.
foundational principle of our country, that we are for and by all American citizens. And all American citizens include that 0th rung. And so I'm okay with a union, an individual union at an individual company, doing things that benefit the workers who already have jobs at that individual company. But that's very different than having the government do that, because the government must be for all of the people, and that's not just the people who currently have jobs, that's everyone.
Okay. No, I get where you're coming from. I don't agree with the solution, or if we do agree on solutions, say I do end up fully agreeing with job guarantee, necessarily the order of operations to get there. Because
Yeah, I guess my concern is, like, it's not an order of operations thing, because I don't think that we should have minimum wage ever.
okay, so fine. If we don't agree on that necessarily.
Yeah.
Again, I said that in an ideal world it wouldn't necessarily be needed. I don't see us getting to that ideal world. I think the exploitation would still be there, even with a federal jobs guarantee. But if we could get to the idealized world, I agree with you. I just don't think we can get there. I also don't think getting rid of the minimum wage in and of itself ends up helping the people that you're trying to, at least enough of them to justify the material damage they're doing to the next rung up, because of all the other stuff that we talked about: housing, healthcare costs, etc. Those things are still going to be constrained, and the possibility of making it to where the median wage of the lowest rung people are suppressed, where they are not able to afford those things, even worse off than what they are now. That is my concern. So my way that I would go for it is, like you said, if that is your concern, go and fight for these other things. I'm for the government creating housing. I'm for the government providing education, healthcare, etc. I want all these things to happen. I don't focus on the minimum wage argument too much. I really don't. When the people say what the minimum wage should be, I say a living wage. That's what I say. But that's it. I don't get into a bunch of debates normally like this.
Yeah, but when you say a living wage, I mean,
a living wage is going to be different regionally, but generally speaking, we can just simplify that to $15 an hour, just for simplicity's sake. I don't actually agree that
14 and 0 is nothing.
Was that?
So the difference between getting 14 and 0 is nothing? Because living wage is, it sounds to 1 and 0, but it's just not. Like, the quality of life at $25 an hour is obviously better than the quality of life at $15 an hour.
Yes,
and the quality of life at 15 is obviously better than 10, but 10 is still obviously a heck of a lot better than 0. So, like, this idea of, like, this 1 and 0, this is a living wage.
I don't think it should be. I'm saying for simplicity's sake that we can break it down to $15. If we wanted to get, like, super advanced with it, we could use the government's own cost of living calculators that they use to pay people in the military based on where they're stationed, because that exists.
Yeah.
And then we could do that across the entire United States and say that's what the minimum wage should be. We could do that. That's not going to happen, but that's what we could do.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't buy that they're that people aren't better off with bad situations than
Well, I
worse.
just think that we could make those bad situations not bad through other methods that don't negatively
But
impact
then why are we
people.
then like let's do that first, and then once we've done that, then
There
what
you
you're
go.
talking about will no longer be relevant. No, because
There you
then
go.
what you're like, right now what you're doing is making an arbitrary cutoff, and if people don't manage to hit that cutoff, they are screwed and they get $0 an hour instead of 5. And once we're in a situation where no one would take 5, then we're in a situation where no one would take 5, and we're in a better situation, but then you don't need to have this artificial cutoff at 5.
Right. I already said in the ideal situation that if we got to your ideal situation, it becomes redundant. I don't necessarily think
it's not redundant. It's that like there's no point in this entire like moving up the ratchet so that people are not going to take a $1 an hour, not going to take a $2 an hour, not take a $3. There's no point there where making it illegal for someone to take it below that number becomes useful. It can only hurt people at the lowest level. It's unionizing, and in that sense, yeah, on the margin, someone who's currently getting paid $14 an hour might be able to be pulled up to $15 an hour. But the person who's getting paid 12 or 11 probably will just lose their job.
I understand the argument. I don't 100% agree with you. You're making a compelling argument, and you're convincing me more so than other people that have made this argument because you're coming from a leftist perspective of it. I'll be honest about that. When right wingers make this argument, it's not in the same way at all. It's really not. They're talking about
like
it's all about consent and like what the business should be allowed to do. We don't want to tell people what to do. So yeah, fuck that shit. Right.
I don't care. The business is completely irrelevant in this conversation.
Yeah. My concern is that if we do get rid of the minimum wage, then we will help people on the 0 rung. Some of those will come up to the first rung, but we might pull some of those people on the first rung down to like 0.5, right? Like that's not a good trade-off necessarily to me. Like if we can avoid doing that by other policies, then I think we should pursue other policies. That's what I'm saying.
Gotcha. All right. Have you been following the union stuff in like colleges and higher ed these days?
I've seen some of it, but not anything recently. The last thing I saw was there was a unionization effort from the teachers' assistants, so the people in master's programs in, was it California?
I think it was California.
I think it was California. That's the last big one I saw. Okay.
Yeah. So let's take that as an example. Let's say there's a teachers union that is responsible for all of the teachers, including those students, those higher education students, those master's students. And then that union decided that they were only going to have faculty who were full-time faculty. They were going to advocate as a union to only permit like full-time faculty to teach. The result of that would be that full-time faculty would have their wages increase, almost certainly. That like tenured faculty and tenured track faculty, associate professors, it would be good for them. It would be at the expense of these students, of these master's students. And I would argue that it would be morally reprehensible for a union that is responsible for protecting the interests of those master's students to do that. Now, if it was a union that was only for tenured faculty or tenured track faculty, I would not have that same moral reservation because it's not their job to protect these students. The problem is that America is a union that includes the homeless.
I get you.
And our obligations include our obligations to the homeless. And it's not just the people who are on that tenure track. It's not just the people who are already on the $7.25 or $15 or $30 an hour.
And from my perspective, because we are everybody, we have to take into account other people, even though I'm primarily a Rawlsian ethics kind of person, that I don't want to see a person that is being, that is just one up on that rung being pulled down to the bottom. I don't want to see that. If we can avoid that, I'm all about avoiding it. I think that we can avoid it. But I have to go. I'm sorry. My wife messaged me 10 minutes ago asking me to call her. So, But we can totally continue this conversation or have the other conversation. I always like talking to you, man. You're a very smart dude. The one about branding or whatever.
Oh yeah. We should totally do that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So.
All right.
But yeah,
have
man.
a good one.
You too.
Good night.
See ya.